what are the four phases of a strategic plan? Does it matter where your company is as to what type of plan you should do?
Yeah, there are four phases of planning, and every business probably has gone through one or more, or tried to go through one or more. The first one is when you're a relatively new business, you're really just trying to meet the budget. You've got cash coming, you've got cash going. You're not particularly worried about competition. You're not overly concerned about market environment. What you're really worried about is, can I make my business last long enough that people will actually, buy the products or the services I'm offering? And it tends to be a cash management type of an environment. As you get more experience and as your business takes on the growth phases, you tend to go to the next level. And the next level is called the forecast forward model. Forecast forward means I'm going to now start looking at multiple years. Why? Because I'm starting to invest in my business. Year one, when I had my budget planning, it was good enough just to make sure the cash worked. But as I go out to years 2, 3, 4, and 5, what I'm concerned about is, do I have the right focus? Am I going to need to invest in a business? Do I have to build offices, employ people? So I start to do multi-year forecasts of what the business would have to accomplish so I could afford to do that. As you get successful in that mode, you start paying more attention to the real world out there and the competition. And when you're out there into phase 3, now for the first time you're really thinking strategically, because I've got to position my company not only to serve a customer, but I got to position the company to beat the competition. This is also the first time where you start allocating time, people, and money on a dynamic basis versus a static basis. In the first two phases, you just kind of spent the monies the way you always did. Marketing got X% of the budget, sales got X% of the budget, and it was pretty much the same every year. As you get into phase 3, the strategic planning, then you got to start dynamically allocating resources. Marketing may be taking less monies this year because the focus needs to be on R&D or product development. And then the fourth phase of planning is when you get into creating the future. That's when you're in a strong, dominant role in your market space, and you're now able to orchestrate all the things you do to cause something to happen in the marketplace that's different and unique from what anybody else is able to accomplish. I've seen this done by companies such as Dell. Dell was able to totally create the future for the way computers are going to be sold. Now others are mimicking what they do. So you don't tend to stay in phase 4 of creating the future. You tend to make excursions in and then come back to the strategic thinking part. But for people who are worried about planning, probably 90% of the people who do planning are somewhere between phase 2 and phase 3, somewhere between multi-year forecasting and some strategic thinking. And for most of us, that's plenty good. I think if you start thinking about the planning model itself, there's, as I said before, everybody's model looks pretty much the same. All processes pretty much do the same thing. They're a funnel that lets you look at a million things and then narrow them down to the few things that you actually want to invest in. But if you really want to simplify the model more, what we've been talking about is the importance of just thinking about 3 parts. It's the reality, the external reality you're facing. It's the internal competency you have, and that defines reality. The second part says, if I understand where reality is going, then I can put my business, or I can aim my business at that reality. So that's the focus part. And then if I've aimed my business correctly at the real world, then I can figure out what to do in the way of competencies internally. What kind of people do I need to employ? What kind of infrastructure do I put in place? What kind of systems do I have to put in play? And so it comes down to looking at reality, which it is. Reality will go wherever it wants to go. Then focus, saying I'm going to aim my business against that reality. And then what falls out is what competencies will it require. And if people could just kind of keep that model in mind, and it's an adapted model from Peter Drucker, if they could keep that model in mind, they could really simplify the way they do planning. And that kind of is the bottom line of planning. It ought to simplify the business. It should not complicate it. It ought to improve communications, not confuse them. It ought to help you achieve the end results you had in mind. It shouldn't muddy up the water. So the simpler the planning model, the better the result. And again, the result is all about what outcome you achieve, not about what effort you put forward.
So, Dave, what is the bottom line?
I guess the original question was, should I do planning? Or one of the original questions was, should I do planning? And my answer was, it depends. If I were to give my personal bias, I can suggest to you that from lots of years of doing this, either as a CEO using plans or as a planning consultant, we know that companies who embark on a real planning process, meaning one they're going to use to improve or run their business, do better than companies that don't. The goal of planning is to be proactive, not reactive. The companies that seem to struggle are the ones who experience their business. And the real purpose of planning is to get out in front, see the trends, understand what changes you need to make. And what people tend to really not understand very well about planning, it's a gradual transformation process. It's not an abrupt change. So if you're using planning to make abrupt changes, it's probably the wrong way to use planning. If you're in a business space now where you're running your company the way you want to run it, this is where strategic planning really makes the difference, because I can gradually reposition myself while I have the ability to run my current business. You plan best when you're not in panic. And so good companies plan on a continuous basis, and that's why I said at the very beginning, it's a process, not an event.
Now that you have a clear understanding of who should do planning, the 4 phases and the 4 types, and how they can help your organization, you may want to take the next steps and begin devising plans of your own. Aileron is here to help with multiple offerings to assist you. These include strategic management, business planning, environmental analysis, operational planning, and more. Visit Aileron's website at aileron.net to view a list of upcoming offerings. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to working with you soon.